Hello and welcome, and thanks for tuning in. You're watching Gravitas. My name is Priyanka Sharma. Here's our show for tonight. When will the hostages held by Hamas return home? How many are still alive? Will all of them return home alive? I ask these questions because reports say that Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has given hope to the families of those held captive by Hamas. Netanyahu says a deal could be underway to free all hostages held by Hamas. On Gravitas tonight, we shall discuss, will all 239 hostages return home safely? What are the terms of this deal? Who are the negotiators? What does Hamas want in return? Stay tuned. Also on the show, the most hated woman in British politics. Divisive, polarizing, downright insensitive. These are just some of the words that critics have used to describe Suella Braverman, the now sacked Home Minister of the United Kingdom. Is this the end of Braverman's political career, or is she aiming for a higher office? We shall discuss tonight. The death of Yevgeny Prigozhin prompted the all-important question, who will lead the Wagner paramilitary group? Tonight, we have the answer. Our top focus. Is Israel losing Western support amid the Gaza war? Is that pushing Israel to consider a hostage deal with Hamas? Is the United States leading secret diplomacy towards a hostage exchange in Gaza? Has Israel realized that if it needs America's support, it needs to make some concessions? Why do I ask these questions tonight? Because negotiations to free hostages are quietly underway. And now, Netanyahu has hinted at talks of a deal. This is big. Because as the humanitarian crisis in Gaza intensifies, people have been asking, does Netanyahu prioritize victory over civilian lives? So far, Netanyahu has flatly rejected calls for a ceasefire, and Hamas has also suspended hostage release talks after Israel's El Shifa hospital bombing. So then, what could this possibly entail? What could this potential deal entail? On Sunday, the Israeli Prime Minister told US media that there could be a deal on hostage release. However, he refrained from giving any specifics about the plan. He appeared cautious. He said, and I quote, "There could be a deal on hostages, but I think the less I say about it, the more I'll increase the chances that it materializes." Netanyahu said that Israel wasn't close at all to a deal until his military started its ground operation in Gaza. He argues that any possible deal was a result of military pressure on the Hamas group. In a series of appearances on US talk shows, he sought to make it clear that Israel was doing everything it could to secure the release of those held captive. The US also spoke about a potential hostage deal. White House National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby said, and I quote, "Active negotiations and conversations going on with our counterparts in the region." He too, like Netanyahu, stayed quiet on details. He added, the less said publicly about these sensitive negotiations and conversations, probably the better. On Sunday, US President Joe Biden spoke with Qatari leader Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. According to a White House statement, Biden has expressed appreciation to Qatar for securing the release of hostages from Hamas, including American citizens. The White House stressed that Biden unequivocally condemned the holding of hostages by Hamas, including many young children, one of whom is a 3-year-old American toddler whose parents were killed by Hamas during its assault on October 7th. Both leaders concurred that all hostages must be released without further delay. According to US media reports, the US is actively involved in the hostage diplomacy. This week, Brett McGurk, the president President Biden's top Middle East advisor, that is reportedly en route to Israel, Jordan, Saudi Arabia and Qatar. McGurk is a key figure in these negotiations, alongside U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. As per reports, active negotiations are ongoing between Israel and Qatar. Remember, Qatar is in communication with Hamas. The U.S. is actively participating in these discussions. It seems the main hurdles in these talks revolve around Hamas not providing a list of hostages held, or those they could release as part of a potential deal. And let's not forget, other terror groups like the Islamic Jihad have also reportedly taken hostages, including children. Naturally, this is complicating the situation. The US and Qatari diplomats are zeroing in on civilian hostages, especially children and elderly captives. There are also Israeli military personnel believed to be held captive as of now. This adds another layer of complexity to the situation. So it's safe to say Israel is grappling with a big dilemma as its military campaign in Gaza continues. The question is, will Israel opt for any type of ceasefire to secure the release of hostages, or will it risk their lives by pressing ahead with its offensive against Hamas? Keep in mind, Hamas is believed to have a substantial part of its infrastructure cleverly tucked away in an intricate network of underground tunnels, where many hostages are presumed to be held. Israel asserts it has the technology to dismantle this tunnel threat, with forces already working to destroy them on war footing. However, it's not without risk. It could come at the cost of hostages' lives. Today, the toll of the Israeli bombardment stands at over 11,000 Palestinian lives. Around 240 people continue to be held captive in Gaza by Hamas. Even though Israel's closest ally, America, is yet to demand a ceasefire, there is growing international chorus for a ceasefire in Gaza, including calls from Europe. All this has prompted the US, which has vowed staunch support for Israel, to become increasingly vocal about the need to spare civilian lives. And America's influence has worked, with Israel agreeing to daily 4-hour pauses in fighting so that aid can go to Gaza, crucial life-saving aid. But how far US backdoor diplomacy influences Israel's action in Gaza remains to be seen. We'll have to wait and watch as the situation unfolds. Our next story is from the United Kingdom, and it begins with a very important question. Is the UK's ruling party headed for a split? Are the Tories preparing for a civil war? These questions crop up due to a sacking. The sacking of UK's Home Secretary Suella Braverman. She's gone. On Sunday night, she was shown the door, removed from office, relieved of all her duties. Why? Because of some comments that she made recently. You see, on the 8th of November, she wrote an article for the Times UK, the one on your screens now. In this piece, the former minister accused the Met Police, London's Met Police, of adopting double standards on protests. What protests? The ongoing pro-Israel and pro-Palestine demonstrations. She said the police was being biased in the way it was treating these demonstrations. It was favouring one side and cracking down on the other. Allow me to quote an excerpt from her piece. It states, "Right-wing and nationalist protesters who engage in aggression are rightly met with a stern response. Yet, pro-Palestinian mobs displaying almost identical behaviour are largely ignored, even when clearly breaking the law. I have spoken to serving and former police officers who have noted this double standards." This one paragraph, this one observation has caused Braverman's fall from grace. Look at these visuals now. They show Braverman leaving her home near London on Monday. So who's going to fill her shoes now? James Cleverly, the 54-year-old, has been asked to switch from the role of Foreign Secretary, which he had held for a year. He will now look after domestic affairs. Then, who will be in charge of foreign affairs? A rather popular face. David Cameron. Yes, the former Prime Minister has been named as the new Home Foreign Secretary. This will mark his return to the political front line after he quit in 2015 when he failed to keep Britain in the European Union. On Monday morning, he was seen walking into 10 Downing Street to discuss the reshuffle with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. All said and done, the big question on everyone's minds is this: is Suella Braverman going to challenge her removal? No one knows yet. She's perhaps saving her remarks for the right time. But she did speak to the media, saying, and I quote, "It has been the greatest privilege of my life to serve as Home Secretary. I will have more to say in due course." We wonder what more means. Is Braverman waiting to garner support among the Tories before she issues an official statement? It surely seems like it. Just look at what the British media is saying. A report by The Guardian states that Braverman could stir up a civil war within the Conservative Party. It says, thanks to her sacking, she can now position herself as a change candidate of sorts in the next election. What does that mean? This means that in the next election, if Sunak's prospects look bad, as they do now, Braverman could look very, very appealing as a candidate, because she would be untainted by government decisions. But before that happens, the Tories could also face a revolt. According to reports, Braverman has the support of more than 50 Tory MPs. Most of them belong to hard-right Tory groups, which are labelled as the quote-unquote 5 families. They're accusing Rishi Sunak's associates of orchestrating a plot against Braverman. Among Braverman's defenders are leaders like Miriam Cates and Danny Kruger. They both defended their friend, saying her views were pretty mainstream and that much of the public agreed with her. In fact, this is what Danny Kruger had to say. Allow me to quote. "Terrorist sympathizers are marching through London calling for the destruction of the Jewish state while the police stand by. But hey, let's all focus on which version of an article was cleared by 10 Downing. Can the media possibly please focus on the things that actually matter?" It doesn't end there. This is what another Tory MP said on the condition of anonymity. I'm quoting again. "There are many people upset about this because Suella has made a very good point about the Met and the treatment of demonstrators, and she also represents what many of our members and constituents actually say and think. To hound her out would be untenable." Now here's the thing, we don't know if Sunak was right or not. But Braverman's sacking is indeed quite striking. She was arguably the most popular face in Sunak's cabinet, maybe notorious, depending on how you look at her track record. You see, Braverman never hesitated to live up to her image of being a hardline Conservative leader. She frequently grabbed headlines for her provocative remarks on migration, protesters, the police, even the homeless. In fact, many of her critics go to the extent of saying that she's the most divisive politician of her age. Here's why. Braverman once suggested that charities in the United Kingdom should be banned from giving tents to the homeless. Why? To stop them from causing nuisance and distress to local residents. She said the homeless people were making a lifestyle choice by doing so and disrupting public order. That's not all. Braverman once also claimed that immigrants were pretending to be gay in order to be granted asylum in the UK and get special treatment. I'm not making this up. Her remark drew criticism even from British celebrities. And once, Braverman even labelled the arrival of migrants to the UK as an invasion, a phrase which even the Archbishop of Canterbury described as quote-unquote dangerous rhetoric. These remarks make it seem as if Braverman invited all of this upon herself. That as if she wanted to get herself sacked so that she could position herself against Sunak. I mean, she had been courting controversy ever since she assumed office. So this begs the question, did she always have something bigger in her mind? Is she eyeing a bigger post, a higher office perhaps? Or perhaps Tory leadership in the next election? Her critics will definitely be watching her every move. Since we're talking about the United Kingdom, did you see what happened in London this weekend? Hundreds of thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters took over central London. It was the largest rally calling for a ceasefire in Gaza in the UK since the Israel-Hamas war began. But that was not all that protesters wanted. Some called it a hate march against Suella Braverman. We now know how that ended. Braverman is out. In our next report, we show you more. Take a look.
I'm here because of the appalling state of affairs in Palestine. and the genocide of the Palestinian people by the Israeli government.
What's happening in Gaza is absolutely shocking and it needs to stop. You know, it's terrible.
I'm here because Israel has recently, last night, 24 hours, bombarded Al-Shifa hospital.
This was London this weekend. A sea of people took over the heart of the city. They say they want an end to the war in Gaza. UK's biggest pro-Palestinian march saw some 300,000 people take to the streets. But it was the date on which they chose to protest which got the British government worried. Saturday's rally coincided with Armistice Day, an annual commemoration of the end of World War I. Prime Minister Sunak wasn't too happy with the protesters. He asked them to postpone it, but organizers of the march thought Armistice Day was the perfect opportunity to demand a complete ceasefire in Gaza. But this protest quickly became a nightmare for London authorities. 7 men have been charged with disorder on Armistice Day for offences including inciting racial hatred. London's Met Police says of the 145 arrested, a vast majority were counter-protesters. The now sacked Home Secretary Braverman was branded the most hated woman in British politics. She said the police was too lenient with the pro-Palestinian marchers. Protests continued across the world. This is Boston, Massachusetts. This weekend, thousands of pro-Palestinians marched calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. They weren't too happy with their president, Joe Biden.
I think it hurts. It's a little hypocritical what America is doing to the Palestinians every day. And as someone who lives here and knowing my tax money is going to fund this apartheid, it's just so unfair and unjust. And I just have to go out and speak about this, because if I'm going to sit here all day long and do nothing about it, the genocide is going to continue to happen and it'll never stop.
This is Frankfurt, Germany. Around 1,000 pro-Palestinians gathered at the central Roemenberg Square.
So we are here today to support the Palestinians. We are, of course, against the killing of civilians and children and the bombing of the hospitals. We see no excuse for doing this, and that's why we are here to show our solidarity for the Palestinians.
Pro-Israel protesters took to the streets in Sydney. They demanded that all hostages captured by Hamas be released immediately. Meanwhile, hundreds of Pakistanis marched through the streets of Islamabad. Pakistan expressed solidarity with those suffering in Gaza. This war is one of the most polarizing ones in history. Those are marching for a side feel very passionately for the same, even if they don't know the history between the two sides.
Shifting our focus now to the other war in Ukraine. Russia has launched a new offensive campaign on Ukraine's eastern front line after the fierce battle for Bakhmut. Another town has now become a flashpoint in this conflict. Reports say Russian troops have encircled Avdiivka with around 40,000 troops. The bloody battle for Bakhmut earned it the name Meat Grinder, where both Russian and Ukrainian troops lost lives. As winter sets in, a biting winter, creating important, significant challenges on the battleground, will Russia turn the strategic Donetsk town into another meat grinder for Ukrainian troops? Let me tell you what's happened. Russia has doubled down on its offensive to capture Avdiivka. According to the US-based think tank ISW, or the Institute for the Study of War, Russian troops have made big advances around this town. Since October, when it began the offensive with a barrage of attacks, Russia has poured thousands of troops, tanks and vehicles here. The goal is to seize Avdiivka. Why? Because Avdiivka is the gateway to Ukraine's wider Donetsk province. It is an industrial hub, a crucial strategic industrial hub in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region. Not only that, the town has long been a symbol of Ukrainian resistance, especially after it was briefly captured by pro-Russian forces in 2014, when Russia had illegally annexed Crimea from the country. To capture Avdiivka, the Russian forces have reportedly been committing more manpower, more material. They are preparing for larger scale offensive operations near this East Donetsk town in particular. According to Russian war bloggers, Russian forces hold positions within a third of a mile in Avdiivka itself. It means the town is effectively surrounded. And if that wasn't enough, Russians are also routinely striking the town with artillery and military jets. A bombardment here last Thursday reportedly killed 2 civilians. The Russian forces have increased their use of aviation with choppers and attack aircraft. All this over the past few days. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces did not conduct any claimed or confirmed ground attacks in the Avdiivka direction. The head of Ukraine's southern group of forces said that troops around Avdiivka were stoutly holding their defenses. Ukrainian military has admitted that Russia is building up reserves for a fresh push to seize this town, that is Avdiivka. In fact, last week, Anton Kotsukun, the spokesperson for Ukraine's 110th Separate Mechanized Brigade, said that Russian troops had Avdiivka surrounded on 3 sides. The Ukrainian official also described it as a game of cat and mouse. He said that Russia was sending up huge numbers of drones to analyze Kyiv's defenses. Russia's fight to seize Avdiivka is looking like a repeat of its year-long campaign to capture nearby Bakhmut, which fell in May. As in Bakhmut, the Russian tactics have consisted of waves of infantry attacks, and now the Ukrainian commanders predict that Russian wave attacks would soon become denser. Ukraine's much-hyped counter-offensive has so far resulted in only incremental gains and heavy losses. The Ukrainian troops have struggled to punch through Russian lines in the south. Now, as Russian forces press forward in the northeast, the Ukrainian troops are bracing for a third wave of attacks here. Even Ukrainian President Zelensky has described the situation here as particularly tough. On Sunday, he warned Ukrainians to prepare for new waves of Russian attacks. Attacks on infrastructure ahead of crucial winter months. He fears that Russia will pick up its campaign or systemic strikes on power facilities, virtually freezing the country in winter, just like it did last year. And with the rate of Russian strikes on Ukraine, it seems that the conflict is heading towards another year of winter warfare. Time now for Gravitas Snapshot, a segment where we discuss and analyze public figures who are making headlines. Tonight we'll be discussing Pavel Prigozhin, a 25-year-old obscure individual who is now allegedly running Russia's largest and fiercest mercenary outfit. I'm talking about the Wagner Group. Pavel is its new commander. No prizes for guessing why. His last name gives away his lineage. You see, Pavel Prigozhin is a son of none other than Yevgeny Prigozhin, the former Wagner boss who died in a mysterious air crash. Before he died, he amassed significant wealth, primarily through his group's contracts. Reports suggest that Pavel Prigozhin is the sole inheritor of his father's assets and his entire private militia. But who exactly is he? And is he the right fit for the task? Let's find out. To start with, the 25-year-old Pavel controls a business called Lakhta Plaza. In March last year, this firm was sanctioned by America due to the war in Ukraine. In fact, Pavel himself has been sanctioned by numerous nations, including Canada, the United States, and the United Kingdom. He also owns several businesses and luxury real estate enterprises in St. Petersburg. Pavel also plays various roles in Prigozhin's business enterprises. These organizations prosper because Pavel's favored status within the Russian elite. And he's not alone. Reports say his decisions are being supervised by Mikhail Vatanin, the head of Wagner's security service. He's being groomed, some would say. So what will Pavel's next move be? Well, reports say that he has already started recruiting fighters for the Wagner group again. They're being hired to expand the group's operations abroad. In fact, on its Telegram channel, the group recently shared a post with the caption reading, "We're coming back." The post added details for anyone willing to sign a contract with the Wagner group. That said, there's little guarantee that Pavel Prigozhin will be able to take the Wagner group to the kind of heights that his father did. Last we checked, the group had apparently been absorbed into the Russian National Guard, a branch which deals with internal security threats and reports directly to Vladimir Putin. Plus, Putin would never really let Prigozhin's son acquire the kind of power the father had. After all, he cannot afford yet another mutiny. Let's move on now. A new bromance is brewing on the global stage. In 2 days, US President Joe Biden will meet his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. This will be at the APEC summit in San Francisco. The last time the two leaders met was in November 2022. It has been a year since. US-China ties have only frayed after that. And now, all eyes are on the Wednesday meeting. So what's on the agenda? What will President Biden and Xi talk about? Will the relations between the US and China thaw? Will the fraying ties be stabilized? Let me break it all down for you. Number one, the US seeks to restore military-to-military communication with China. This is high on President Biden's priority list. He's expected to advance the ball with Xi on military ties. I'm not the one who's saying this. It's America's National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan. He said, and I quote, "The president is determined to see the re-establishment of military-to-military ties because he believes it's in the US national security interest. We need those lines of communication so that there are not any mistakes or miscalculations or miscommunications." You see, when the then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan last year, Beijing abruptly cut off communication with the US military. This raised concerns among American officials. They feared possible miscommunication or miscalculation in the South China Sea or around Taiwan, since the waters are highly contested. A steady stream of Biden administration officials have since visited Beijing. This includes Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo. Yet, the military channels have not been restored. So will this upcoming meeting between President Biden and Xi reopen the military communication? Next on the agenda would be Taiwan. The island is set to have elections in January 2024. This may ramp up sensitivities around its status, the status quo. As it is, China regularly showcases its power with military exercises off Taiwan's coast. Chinese leaders have stepped up their threats against Taiwanese independence. For the US, Taiwan is an important partner in the Indo-Pacific. So will it be able to manage credible non-war guarantees from China? We can't say what President Xi's response would be, but we do know this. And that is what the US wants. Another thing on the agenda would be what's happening in West Asia, the Israel-Hamas war. The US needs to work closely with China given its growing influence in the region. Traditionally, China only focused on economic engagement with the Arab world, but now it has been more than willing to mediate regional conflict. Earlier in the year, China brokered the Saudi-Iran normalization agreement. It has also shown interest in de-escalating the Israel-Palestine crisis, which the US can use to its advantage. China has also shown inclination towards renewing the Iran nuclear deal. Next, Biden and Xi are also expected to discuss Iran. The National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says, and I quote again, "The question of Iran's nuclear program and the threat it poses will be on the agenda of the meet, as will the threat that Iran poses to regional stability and the threat it poses to US forces in the region." For years now, the US has been imposing sanctions on Iran. It is seeking to tighten them even further. But Iran is a key source of oil for China. So will President Biden ask Xi Jinping to stop buying Iranian oil on the cheap? Also on the table are areas of potential cooperation, like climate change and countering narcotics trafficking. Not to forget the deep disagreements over human rights issues. Last year, when President Biden and Xi Jinping departed Indonesia after meeting, they appeared to be on track to engage in more regular talks. But only months later, the hopes for normalizing ties between the US and China were scuttled. A Chinese spy balloon. Close encounters in both the air and the Taiwan Strait. Diplomatic spats over the theft of technology, hacking and trade. A drought of military-to-military talks, even the lapse of a Panda agreement, all of this has delivered sharp blows to US-China diplomatic ties. And it happened despite a deep and apparently warm personal relationship that Biden and Xi cultivated during their time as vice presidents. So, will the upcoming meeting see more of this bromance? We'll have to wait and watch. Let's now shift our focus to India. After recording its best air quality on Diwali Day, almost after 8 years, the air quality in India's national capital, New Delhi, has worsened yet again. The reason? No surprises here, Diwali fireworks. After a night of celebrations, citizens woke up to smoky skies. And Delhi, along with the National Capital Region, or NCR, recorded the overall AQI above 500, with some places even reaching as high as 900. In our next report, we show you how the Festival of Lights turned fatal for many. Take a look.
Millions of Delhi residents celebrated Diwali on Sunday. Lights and oil lamps lit up the homes and streets across the country. And this was the scene the day after Diwali. Sadly, as colourful and sparkly the celebrations were, the morning after Diwali was blanketed in a thick layer of smog, leading to heavy pollution all across the city and nearby regions. While the AQI in many areas peaked in the severe category, the worst was recorded in the India Gate area, where the AQI level stood at 999. And this was because of the widespread violation of the firecracker ban across the capital and nearby regions. And with the plummeting air quality levels, a war of words also broke out between the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party and the Aam Aadmi Party. BJP state president for Delhi accused Delhi's chief minister of quote-unquote inaction and being insensitive and turning Delhi into a gas chamber. The Congress party also raised concerns about the improper implementation of the Supreme Court ban on firecrackers.
BJP wanted that there should be firecrackers in the area, and all these areas belong to the BJP. We can see what has happened.
Delhi has been battling toxic air for weeks, with the government announcing an early winter break for schools in an effort to protect children. But the problem becomes worse in winter as farmers in neighboring states burn crop stubble. The World Health Organization's guidelines say that exposure to PM 2.5 over a 24-hour period should be limited to 15 micrograms per cubic meter. But Delhi's AQI in some parts reached at least 30 times higher than the recommended level. Lung specialists say breathing the capital's toxic air is akin to smoking 25 to 30 cigarettes a day. But apart from dealing with toxic air, Diwali celebrations for many in the national capital turned fatal. According to the Delhi Fire Service Department, over 200 calls of fire-related incidents were reported on the eve of Diwali. At least 166 calls were related to blazes, including 22 caused by firecrackers and 21 fires in garbage. Apart from New Delhi, 2 other Indian cities joined the national capital to be among the world's top 10 cities for pollution. New Delhi, the world's most polluted capital, took the top spot with an air quality index of 420, with Kolkata in India's east coming in 4th with an AQI of 196. The financial capital of Mumbai was 8th with an AQI of 163. Pune clocked in at 162. Diwali, the festival of lights, is a time most Indians love because they get to celebrate with their families and bring a joy of togetherness. However, as they bask in the glow of diyas and indulge in some season delights, it is important to reflect on the impact of firecrackers on the environment. With the world grappling with pressing ecological concerns, making this Diwali eco-friendly is not a choice, but a responsibility we all must understand.
Is a period pant your go-to menstrual product? Then you might want to reconsider your choice, no doubt. These underpants provide comfortable absorption during periods, but an investigation has posed questions on their safety. And no lighter one at that. Several period underpants have been found to contain very high levels of silver, and that can cause serious health problems in women. You see, period underwears promise antimicrobial action. They also promise a sting-free period for up to several hours. And how do they fulfill these promises? By using silver in their garments. The silver is supposed to kill all the bacteria. But guess what? Not all vaginal bacteria is bad. However, the silver particles cannot make out the difference. The US Food and Drug Administration found that silver can kill lactobacillus bacteria as well. Now, this healthy bacteria helps fight off infection in female genitals. In its absence, women grow more prone to infections and worse, pregnancy complications. Other than that, silver can be cytotoxic. That is, it can kill the cells in your body. Studies have found that silver accumulated in vaginal tissues is toxic and can cause adverse ultrastructural changes to the cells, to your body. When worn during an MRI scan, period underwear containing silver can cause thermal burns. What's more concerning is some brands don't clearly mention that their period pants contain silver. They simply mention antimicrobial and move on. And not everyone can connect the dots or understand what it actually means. In the UK, manufacturers do not have to declare the presence of silver on their packaging or website. Some high street retailers use notably higher levels of silver compared to other brands. The investigation, as mentioned by reports, has found that Intima period pants by Bodyform contain more than 126 milligram of silver per kilogram. Menstrual pants by Marks & Spencer contain close to 58 milligram of silver per kg. A few other brands contained 8.3 milligram per kg, 7.4 milligram per kg and 0.9 milligram per kg. You see, there are no legal limits in the United Kingdom about how much silver can be added to period pants. But can you imagine? While some brands are using silver in one-digit figures, others are hitting 2 and 3 digits. In fact, regulators say that the use of silver is quite unnecessary. Previous testing by an Italian consumer organization found that silver doesn't even offer the promised antimicrobial properties. But regardless of that, period pants manufacturers actively use silver in the product. If you are someone who regularly wears them, take this as a warning. Maybe it's time you switch to some other product, but do your research. And before we wrap up, time now to take a look at what else is happening around the world in Gravitas Global Headlines.
Donald Trump Jr. is expected to take the witness stand in New York for a second time as defense lawyers for the family firm make their case in the $250 million fraud trial. Trump Jr. is the first witness to testify from the defense's witness list, which also includes Donald Trump and Eric Trump as witnesses, though it is unclear whether they will end up being called. Indian-owned steelmaking giant Tata Steel announces it will scrap over 800 jobs at its under-pressure plant in the Netherlands to improve market conditions and bring down costs. The cuts will affect some 500 full-time workers, mainly in management, staff and support functions, while another 300 temporary jobs were also to disappear. After experiencing a series of earthquakes and a flow of magma, Icelandic authorities said they have begun preparations for the safety of citizens in view of a possible volcanic eruption in the southwest of the island in the coming days. Iceland's Civil Protection Agency overnight ordered a complete evacuation of Grindavik, a fishing town of around 3,000 residents. According to experts, Grindavik town, located near the capital Reykjavik, could be heavily damaged by a volcano eruption. Emirates Airline announces a $52 billion order for 95 Boeing planes in the biggest sale so far at the Dubai Air Show. A purchase of 55 Boeing 777-9S and 35 Boeing 777-8S comes alongside an upgrade to an existing order for 30 787 Dreamliners, which rises to 35. Rescuers in northern India battle for a second day to save 40 workers trapped underground after the road tunnel collapsed, bringing down tons of debris. Teams using heavy excavators have been working tirelessly since the collapse early Sunday morning to clear piles of concrete and earth, but with more debris falling as workers tried to clear a passage, a giant steel pipe was being prepared as an escape route. Extreme floods wreak havoc in the streets of the Western Ireland region of Galway as Storm Debbie barrels in from the Atlantic, as Britain's Met Office issued alerts for strong winds up to 80 miles per hour in the northwestern county of Lancashire. The storm is expected to move east across Ireland and towards England. The Hindu community in Pakistan celebrated the Diwali festival on Sunday with prayers and celebrations at temples across the country. In Karachi, people offered prayers at the Sri Swaminarayan temple, set off firecrackers, shared sweets, and exchanged gifts. As the world's nations enter another round of talks this week on creating a first-ever treaty to contain plastic pollution, officials are bracing for tough negotiations over whether to limit the amount of plastic being produced or just to focus on the management of waste, working with a document called a Zero Draft that lists possible policies and actions to consider. National delegates to the week-long meeting in Nairobi, Kenya, will be debating which of those options to include in what eventually would become a legally binding treaty by the end of 2024. Officials involved in the negotiations said. Five-time champions Chelsea and holders Manchester City shared the spoils in an incredible 4-4 draw in the English Premier League. Chelsea's Cole Palmer scored a stoppage time penalty to deny his former club a victory at Stamford Bridge. It's been another sensational year for Novak Djokovic. The 24-time Grand Slam champion has secured a year-end #1 ranking for a record-extending 8th time. This after he beat Holger Rune 7-6, 6-7, 6-3 in his opening round-robin match at the ATP Finals.
What would you expect to see on Italian streets? Beautiful piazzas, tourists flocking on cobblestone streets, commuters on bikes. Would you ever expect a wild animal prowling around freely? Maybe in a wild dream, but it has actually come true in the Italian seaside town of Ladispoli. A lion named Kimba escaped from a local circus. Soon scenes of terror unfolded. Residents saw the lion casually strolling without restraint. And speaking of unusual sights, here in India, as people celebrated Diwali, a robot was seen offering prayers to Lord Ganesh. You have to watch it to believe it. I'll leave you with these visuals. Thanks for watching Gravitas Tonight with me.
Madonna Santa, Mamma mia, Madonna Santa, Mamma mia, Madonna Santa.
Israel woke up to a barrage of thousands of rockets fired from the Gaza Strip.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
Hostilities have broken out between Israel and Palestine, and the tensions that had been gathering steam over the course of the last several weeks and months.
The siren has gone off. I don't know if you can hear in the background what's going on. I'm going into the shelter now. So it's a very, very serious situation here across Israel. It's a state of emergency.